Hi, this is StrategyCast, where smart marketers and bold business thinkers share the plays behind brand breakthroughs. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Oversight Communications. The conversation around AI often focuses on tools, automation, and efficiency. But for many leaders, the bigger challenge isn't the technology itself. It's figuring out how to guide their organizations through a fundamental shift in how decisions are made, how work gets done, and how growth is created. In today's episode, we'll discuss how marketing leadership is evolving in the AI era, what organizations need to do to build trust and accountability, and how leaders can position their teams for success as AI becomes a permanent part of the business landscape. Joining me today is Jeff Chancellor, Chief Marketing Officer at Oversight. Jeff regularly advises organizations on the future of AI, go-to-market strategy, and marketing leadership, giving him a unique perspective on what effective adoption looks like in practice.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. It's really great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to pontificate with you.
Well, I tell you, I think a lot of us are doing that today at the marketing table, right? There's no doubt about it. Before we dive into what I think is such a great topic, we're talking a lot about AI today, but really the integration and how ultimately what you're seeing in the marketplace regarding some best practices. Tell us a little bit about your background and the path that you've taken in leading marketing teams across the nation and world, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I've spent most of my career helping technology companies navigate periods of significant change, right? So earlier in my career, those changes centered around analog to digital mobile telecommunications, going through cloud computing, through SaaS, through digital transformations, into global go-to-market evolutions. And then today, much of that conversation has shifted to AI. While today my title is Chief Marketing Officer, and it's long been marketing executive of some kind, right?
Exactly.
I've never really thought of myself or my role simply as leading marketing. I have always believed my responsibility is to help organizations become better decision-making systems. And that means building operating models where talented people perform at their highest level. So where technology supports those better decisions instead of adding complexity, and where every part of the go-to-market organization is aligned around creating value for customers.
Yeah.
The marketing's been the discipline through which I've had the opportunity to practice that philosophy, which has been, fun, and that's a great space to be in. But whether we're talking about category creation or organizational transformation or AI adoption or commercial growth, the underlying leadership challenge is remarkably consistent, and that's designing systems that allow organizations to learn faster, execute more effectively, and continuously improve.
Yeah.
Marketing's the domain, but leadership's the discipline.
Well, I love that so much. And we, as marketers, I think AI was squarely put on our desk to begin with because most people thought it was going to eliminate our desks, right? So why not prove the methodology and the technology and the need for that from a systematic standpoint for not only how we help growth engines, but how we also help the organization succeed internally. I want to move right into some of the core tenets here. And the first ideology here is moving beyond AI experimentation. Many organizations have spent the last few years experimenting with AI. What's changing now?
So I think here when we talk about, how how organizations have spent these last few years experimenting with AI and how that's changing now, is we've reached the significant inflection point, Lori.
Yeah.
For the past 2 or 3 years, organizations have been asking technology questions.
Mm.
Can AI write content? Can it summarize meetings? Can it automate workflows? Can it generate code? This expands beyond our marketing space. It goes across the business. Those are questions where they needed to be asked, and they were very important because they established what AI was capable of doing for anyone, either in marketing or in their respective discipline. Today, that conversation's a little different. Executives aren't just asking, what can AI do? They're asking whether their organization is prepared to depend on AI and the
Right.
outcomes that AI can deliver every day to help them make important decisions. That's an entirely different level of maturity in your organization. I mean,
Yeah.
that's truly taking system thinking and applying it across your entire organization. And looking at AI as just one component of that entire system rebuild, right?
And it's just that. I mean, it's another tool, it's another software for us to
Exactly.
be able to implement things with day in and day out. So how do you know when an organization is moving beyond that experimentation and into true meaningful adoption?
Yeah. So one thing that, one way you kind of know that you've started moving beyond that is AI begins influencing decisions. And it starts influencing decisions like your pricing decisions, your customer engagement, your financial risk. I mean, you've got forecasting, investment decisions, operational execution, all these things that are being influenced or being potentially decided by the artificial intelligence that you've brought into your system.
Right.
It's becoming an infrastructure rather than just like another application layered in there, right? So what you have to do is, trust. You have to build trust in and accountability into that, because organizations are no longer evaluating AI. They're evaluating whether they're ready to operate with it. And it's really important that you've built in, again, you've put AI into a system that you've built so that you've driven the right accountability, you've got the right human in the loop in the right places, and you've built the trust in so that people know what comes out of that, and the actions that are taking place are actions that are delivering outcomes that I need and I can count on.
Yeah. So let's dive into trust a little bit more. And you've talked a lot about this very topic. And as you know, it's one of the topics that we love as an agency. At the end of the day, we're trust architects, right? And it happens with a lot of strategy work that leads to the right positioning, the message, the right plan, the right execution. Um, you've argued, and you just illustrated it with us right now, that trust may become one of the most important competitive advantages in the AI era. There are a lot of reasons that we see day in and day out to not trust. For instance, there are now 5 billion thought leaders in the world instead of, the hundreds of thousands of us to begin with who built very, very authentic voices. Why do you believe this is such a big issue?
So one of the biggest shifts we're seeing is that AI is no longer confined to isolated use cases. It's becoming embedded in the way organizations operate every day. That changes the nature of trust. So when we talk about trust, historically, trust was often discussed in terms of ethics or compliance. And while ethics and compliance obviously remain incredibly important, and especially as marketers, we're always concerned about the image and the business and our customer experience. Trust has also become something much more fundamental. It's an economic driver now. So organizations only realize value from implementing AI across their systems when people actually use it. Employees have to trust the recommendations before they incorporate them into workflows. Customers have to trust the AI-powered interactions that they're having before they can accept them. And executives in any company have to trust the AI-generated insights before they make meaningful business decisions based on them. Without that trust, the adoption will slow. And when adoption slows, we all know value creation slows. So that's why trust isn't just a governance issue. It's one of the primary drivers of competitive advantage. Trust isn't a soft. Trust is not soft. This is not a soft skill. Trust is a scalable dependency, right? So, one of the reasons I was drawn to Oversight is that our work at Oversight has always centered on trust. Finance leaders are not simply looking for automation, they're looking for responsible decision-making and protecting corporate resources within their organization, meaning reducing risk, maintaining governance. AI only creates value in that environment if people trust both the recommendations that the AI is making and the process behind those recommendations. So if that's true in finance, it's true in marketing.
It really is. And what you're defining here is transparency, right?
Absolutely.
So how important is the role of transparency in creating trust?
Yeah, I mean, we have to have that transparency. One of the biggest misconceptions about AI is that people expect it to be perfect. And I don't actually think that people do expect it to be perfect. They expect it to be understandable.
Yeah.
Where this transparency comes in, right? When someone receives a recommendation, they want to understand, why was that recommended? What information informed it? What assumptions were made? And who remains accountable for that final decision? Because it's not a piece of software.
Yeah.
It's someone in your business, in your system. So transparency doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It gives people confidence that navigating that uncertainty is possible. And I also think, explainability is becoming part of that user experience. So historically, we were focused on designing intuitive software. And now that's increasingly becoming, we need to design with intuitive reasoning.
Right.
And organizations are making, that AI, the recommendations AI is making are understandable, built with trust, moving faster, and they're not just simply producing aggressive outputs. It's truly changing business outcomes.
Yeah. So for hundreds of years, marketers' role beyond, growth generation was really, we were known as the brand police, right? Sometimes the brand Nazis, as a matter of fact. I mean, it's been, one of those things that, some of us proudly wear a badge for. Now, along with that, I think we've become the transparency police as well. We need to make sure that everything being pushed out from many, many different facets of the organization, just not marketing, is truly authentic and trustworthy. What advice do you have for our listeners today on how they manage that along with everything else that we've got to get done on a daily basis?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's a kind of a good segue to one of the questions that was in your briefing doc, which was about the role of the CMO changing in an AI-driven business environment, right?
Right.
And I think it's marketing is evolving from creating messaging to shaping enterprise judgment. What we're witnessing is one of the biggest evolutions of the CMO role in decades. Historically, like you said, marketing owned brand communications, campaigns, demand gen, and those responsibilities, they remain important. They're not going away. But today, marketing also sits at the intersection of customer behavior, market intelligence, AI, revenue operations, digital experience, and increasingly enterprise data. That means that the CMO is not simply responsible for telling the organization the story anymore. We're responsible for helping the organization understand itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's fundamentally different responsibility than go be my brand police.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's a real different type of leadership skill as well. And I think those of us who've been in marketing for decades and have transitioned through many of the technology changes that we talked about at the front end of the show can adapt to this very, very easily. But we've got a lot of younger listeners today who are head of marketing and just don't have the decades experience needed to deploy this sort of thing. What advice do you have for them on how they can navigate this and make sure that they, they're not treading water, but they're truly in the raft on top of it, leading the way?
Yeah. I mean, if I had to think about and identify one leadership capability that's becoming just dramatically more valuable, it would be the systems thinking. AI it introduces enormous complexity. As much as we would like to think, oh, it's going to simplify the world, it actually introduces additional complexity. So organizations now have more data, more automation, more signals. I mean, more technology, faster decision cycles than ever before. Leaders that are coming up now cannot personally manage all of that. Their responsibility becomes designing the organization and the work in the system such that it's capable of managing all of that well.
Right.
One of the biggest shifts in my own leadership through my career has been realizing that my value is not determined by being the smartest person in the room. My value comes from surrounding myself with extraordinary people, giving them clarity, building operating systems that allow them to excel, and creating an environment where great decisions consistently emerge.
Yeah.
So the exec's job, these guys that are, behind us and they're coming up in their careers, their job's not having better answers. It's designing an environment where better answers consistently emerge. And that is through building systems of people and technology, which includes AI, that can drive those consistently better answers.
Yeah. So infrastructure we've established is very, very important. And I think it's very interesting if we think back in time. I believe we've talked a lot about this on the show, that the best marketing communications plans are based on the best business plans that they're provided, and that there are a lot of business plans that quite frankly fail marketing. And I also believe that there's a lot of infrastructure that can fail marketing. You layer in AI and it is just, it's got disaster possibly written all over it without all of everything in place that is needed in order to set it up successfully. What do you believe are the foundational elements needed to be in place before an organization can actually scale AI successfully?
Yeah. One of the biggest misconceptions that I hear is that AI infrastructure is primarily a technology discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an organizational capability discussion. Before an organization can successfully scale AI, it needs a strong operating foundation. So I think about that foundation in 5 layers: purpose, people, data, decision systems, and governance. Technology supports each of those layers, but it does not replace any of them.
Mm-hmm.
If those foundational elements exist, AI becomes an extraordinary multiplier. If they don't exist in your organization, they'll mistake activity for transformation, and it'll just multiply the mess, the chaos. Every AI conversation eventually becomes a leadership conversation. Are we solving meaningful business problems? Do we trust the data? Is the ownership clear? Are decisions measurable? Can we continuously learn from these outcomes? That is infrastructure, and that can scale. Organizations don't scale technology, they scale operating discipline. So you've got to start there. One of the biggest lessons from our work here at Oversight was realizing that while we were rebuilding the marketing organization, it wasn't just primarily about marketing. It was about the infrastructure we redesigned responsibilities around expertise rather than generalist ownership.
Right.
We've
Yeah.
modernized our technology ecosystem. We improved planning. We strengthened sales alignment. Like that was a big one for us. And then we introduced greater operating discipline across the whole org. Those changes improved how the decisions flowed through the organization. And then once that happened, performance naturally started to improve, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one thing that is tough for marketers, across the board is truly balancing the speed with responsibility that you're talking about. What advice do you have for them when you've got a chief operations officer or, the product development team coming to them and saying, we need this done in 30 days and marketing knows it's going to take 90?
Yeah. So organizations should move at two different speeds. During experimentation, move quickly. And that scares every marketer, right? Because we start thinking, well, wait, I don't want to put something out in the market that doesn't matter. Da, 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 da. But during our experimentation, move quickly. Encourage curiosity, test ideas, learn aggressively. But once AI or the technology you're looking at, or fill in the blank, begins influencing customer experiences, financial decisions, operational workflows, or enterprise risk, from Oversight's perspective, leadership has a different responsibility at that point. And that's when discipline becomes essential. So operational AI deserves operational governance. So
Right.
those are you really have to split those out. And every major technology wave that we've followed a similar pattern throughout my entire career. I've seen cloud computing, it's all mobile come and go, SaaS. Initially, organizations get optimized for adoption. And that's the path they go in. They are optimizing for adoption, fast and furious. And eventually they're optimized. Eventually they get to the point where they've got to optimize for reliability.
Yeah. And I think the risk right now with AI and technology in general is that the fundamentals of the importance of audience segmentation and the messaging that we know will resonate, the behavior, the creativity, everything that it takes to create credibility outside of the technology platform that it's delivered within or from. We can't lose sight of the importance of that.
Absolutely.
What advice do you have for our listeners today on how they maintain the fundamentals of the importance of what we as marketers do day in and day out?
Yeah. So I think the titles are they may stay the same while the responsibilities change dramatically, right? Where it's going to be important that we architect these systems, these tools, but we're not just looking at them blindly.
Right.
We've got our titles may stay the same. Our responsibilities will change dramatically from, for example, the CMO's perspective. The CMO's been responsible for understanding customers, building brand, driving demand, and communicating value. But those responsibilities won't go away. But marketing is increasingly sitting at the intersection of customer intelligence, enterprise data, AI initiatives, revenue operations, digital experience, commercial strategy, all the signals that we take in. And that means that a modern CMO or marketing organization in general has to become the organization's primary architect of decision quality. So don't think that the future for marketing and CMOs or anyone in marketing is measured by how many campaigns we launch, or, did we get the right signals in on that segmented customer base and get the right creative and message out to them. It's much more about how effectively is the organization learning and adapting to those signals, and then executing on making those decisions. So to give you an example of this, we've deployed a system here where our ABX program is now, we take it one-to-one, down to one-to-one. So we've got the one-to-many motion, we have the account-based motion, but we can go one-to-one in certain cases. And it took a while for us to be comfortable with that we were getting the right signals, that intelligence that was coming in was actually enabling us to action, and that we were going to get the message right, and that we were going to have, without putting our foot in it. I mean, as with any marketer, exactly everything you would be worried about.
Right.
But, what we've seen is, and we got comfortable with it, but then, as all marketing listeners will understand, it's not just about marketing getting comfortable with the tools that we're using. It's about your full go-to-market engine being comfortable with it. So then you've got SDRs, you've got sellers, you've got all these other teams that need to be a part of that system and have trust in it. So what we've seen is, through consistent outcomes being delivered, we've been able to get the buy-in of all those stakeholders, and they're seeing accelerated outcomes in their day-to-day.
That's great. That's what it's all about.
Exactly. And that's exactly how, when we first started talking to the sellers about this and saying, well, look, we're going to be automatically reaching out to these individuals. By the time you talk to them, they're going to be well down their journey, because we're already going to have been carrying them down the journey through AI and digital means.
Yeah.
That scared them. It terrified them. But then when they started getting on the phone with people, and by the time they were getting on the phone with them, they already knew what they wanted in the product. They knew what it was all about. That, they were at such a different spot in the buying journey that immediately started getting that buy-in. And we started seeing that velocity pay in the business.
Well, and velocity pay is what a lot of boards like to hear today. So yeah, that's fantastic. As we close out our time today, I've got one more question for you. As AI becomes more deeply embedded in the marketing and business engines and operations that we have, what's one responsibility that every marketing leader should be paying much more attention to today?
Yeah, if I could leave folks with one thought, it would be this. It'd be, leadership has never really been about having the best answers. It's been about creating environments where the best answers consistently emerge.
Nice.
So when you're looking at AI doesn't change that. It raises the stakes. The organizations that thrive over the next decade will not necessarily be the ones with the most sophisticated technology. They never have been. They'll be the ones with the clearest purpose, the strongest leadership, and the healthiest operating systems, and the highest quality decisions. So technology will continue evolving, leadership principles will endure. That's why I believe organizations ultimately compete on the quality of their decisions. Our responsibility as leaders is to design organizations that make those decisions better every single day. Organizations compete on the quality of their decisions.
Well, they do, and hallelujah for that, right? Even if 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 are right there, then we're definitely ahead of the game. Jeff, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. What is the best way for our audience to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am on LinkedIn, Jeff Chancellor at Oversight. I appreciate anyone can reach out to me there, or reach out to me an email, jeff.chancellor@oversight.com.
That's great. And you guys can find me on LinkedIn as well, Lori Sartorius Jones. That's a wrap today for StrategyCast. Jeff, thank you so much for your appearance.
Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.